Hi everyone, I'm doing a book review on a very yucky, grey, wet day out there. Yes, welcome to winter in the UK where it does nothing but rain. I don't normally do book reviews of sequels in a series, but I've done Falling Kingdoms and I had to pick up Rebel Spring because I really enjoy Falling Kingdoms. And this is book 2 in the series by Morgan Rhodes. And I started reading this because Reagan from Peru's Projects said it was like one of the best fantasies that she'd read and really enjoyed it. So I thought I'd give it a go. I really enjoyed Falling Kingdoms. I enjoyed it enough to want to know about the rest of the series. And I actually went out and bought this copy because I didn't know it was in my library until a couple of weeks later and I saw it on the shelves, which is mildly annoying, but there we are. And I have to say, I did enjoy it. It was certainly a very good continuation of where Falling Kingdoms had left off, and the characters, they're progressing nicely, that they are developing, that they're not black and white, that actually I'm never quite sure whose side I'm on. I know it says choose a side, but I never quite know if it's Jonas or Cleo or Magnus, which one I'm rooting for, because they've all got shades of grey in there. They're not all marvellously wonderful people. You know, they do bad things, sometimes for good reasons, sometimes not. And they are not, you know, very clearly up against each other. So I quite like that. In that respect, it reminded me of Given to the Sea, where we get to see everybody's point of view and we kind of understand everybody's point of view. And I think that's coming across very much in Rebel Spring. The main baddie in this story, yeah, it turns out there's much more going on, and I don't want to say too much because obviously spoilers, but it's not he's just out there for the power grab, although he is. There is more going on. There's certainly something else in the background why this is happening, so that's really interesting to see how that dynamic is moving in and influencing events, which is quite nice. Obviously, this is a sort of a fantasy war story, so it's quite nice to see that actually characters you've come to know aren't automatically safe because they're knowable characters. You know, names do drop in these books that we wouldn't have thought were going to drop. So I think the whole aspect of nobody's actually safe is quite nice. It's quite refreshing, that, particularly in a sort of a YA fantasy where to kill your characters off tends not to happen. It's more of an adult thingy, particularly Game of Thrones. And that leads me nicely to my next point, people comparing this series to Game of Thrones. They're both fantasy. They both involve political grabs for power. They both involve warring families and warring countries. They both involve some form of magic. Okay, I think I've summed up most fantasy stories there. So why is this one getting singled out for comparison and negative comparison compared to Game of Thrones? To me, it's not Game of Thrones. If you want a depressing, realist view of a potentially fantasy historical, because let's face it, Game of Thrones is based very much on War of the Roses and all the political bickerings going on with all the European families because they're all related to each other throughout history, then go and read Game of Thrones. If you want a world where there is no reward for loyal people, for honest people, for decent people, where bad things happen to good people for what I can tell, no blooming reason whatsoever other than the fact to show how bad some people are, go and read Game of Thrones. If you want warring families and political intrigue and power grabs with a nice little emphasis of hope in it, go and read Falling Kingdoms. For me, Game of Thrones is far too dark and depressing. That's not what I want from a fantasy series. I need that little flicker of light, that little flicker of hope. I read the first 2 Game of Thrones books and gave up because I was so fed up of the darkness. And anything good being squashed completely. No, that's not how fantasy works for me. Might work for you, but not for me. Fallen Kingdoms, though, despite all the bad things happening, two good characters. There is hope going on. There are people still standing there, still saying, we're not having this. We are going to carry on, and we're gonna get through this. And it's a much more hopeful series than Game of Thrones. That is my opinion. I'm entitled to that. But if you don't agree with me and prefer Game of Thrones to Fallen Kingdoms, that's also fine. I'm not going to have a go at you because you like one book better than a different book. That's okay. But, so to compare this to Game of Thrones, it's not fair. And it doesn't help anybody. Because if you don't like Game of Thrones, you still don't know if you're going to like Fallen Kingdoms. So there you are. Rebel Spring does leave on a nice twist again. There is a nice sort of, oh my gosh, where are we going to go from here moment towards the end. There are some major implications that have happened towards the end, and as far as I'm aware, there are 6 books in this series, so there is plenty to still go on. What is nice is rather than these books taking place over several years, they're taking place over several weeks. So the pace of the battle and the pace of the fight is much quicker, it's much more immediate. So you're not sitting there going, oh, is this going to drag on years and years? At the moment, events are happening very quickly, one after the other, as things normally do at the start of a war. I am liking the new characters that are being introduced. It's good to see a series that isn't just relying on its main ones. It is bringing secondary characters to get to know. So I'm hoping we'll see more of them in later books, which should be good. And I will certainly be getting my hands on book 3 in the series, which I know for a fact is not in my library, so I'm definitely going to have to go and buy that one. Which probably means I'll end up getting the whole series to put on my shelf. But Rebel Spring, Fallen Kingdom series, certainly read if you want a fantasy story with family drama, political intrigue, magical elements in it, and a flicker of hope as opposed to doom and gloom. And yes, there's romance, but there's not too much. It's not too much of a layered thing. It's sort of there, but it's not pushed, which is quite nice. I quite like my romance sort of subtly in the background. So there you are. As always, social media links are in the description box down below. Goodreads, Twitter and Instagram. Come and say hi, please. I've also left a link for a booktube channel that I think you should go and check out. Please go and visit them because they talk about things different to how I talk about things. And so I think it's good that you don't just go and watch people who talk about the same things we talk, go and see people who talk about lots of different things. Because I don't know everything about all the books. Other people do, which is quite nice. Please leave comments down below on your thoughts. Have you read the Fallen Kingdom series? What did you think? Have you read the Game of Thrones series? And what did you think? And as always, thank you very much for watching and happy reading. Bye.